Matt Schaff and Jared Smola of DraftSharks.com here for one more look back at 2024 before we, get all the way into 2025. A few weeks ago, we hit on some of our biggest misses from 2024. Jared and I each threw out some players that we got wrong and, what we can learn from getting those players wrong that can help us going forward. Today, we're going to talk the positive side, some of our best fantasy football picks for 2024. And just like with the wrong calls, it's not so much about the who or the what, punishing or celebrating individual picks. It's about figuring out what made these guys right, what lessons we can take from these selections and how they performed, and then spin them ahead so that then we can improve our drafting in 2025 and, ideally beyond. We've got 3 players apiece that we're going to discuss. But first, I'm just getting Jared back after a vacation to Florida. Jared, you took 2 young kids via airplane to Disney World. How was it?
Exhausting. I heard a quote recently that vacationing with kids is just parenting in a different city. Could not be more accurate. That's what it is. But it was a great time. I saw the sun for the first time in 6 months. It felt like so. It was nice, but glad to be back. I was offline there, very offline for about a week, but I feel like I'm finally caught up on all the news that broke while I was away last week. Projections are updated on the site. Rankings are updated. So if you are drafting those things are good to go.
And you could tell how much having those young kids disrupts Jared's awareness of time passing, because he and I had just been in Florida the week before. He thinks it's been 6 months since he saw the sun. It was literally 4 days. So
it felt like one long trip to me. I was just a guest Floridian for 3 weeks there.
I'm going to guess it was a little bit more relaxing when it was the Draft Sharks staff down there as opposed to your young kids. Because I've certainly been on vacation enough time with youngsters to be like, this isn't so much a vacation, like you said, as it is just parenting elsewhere without most of our stuff around, without anywhere I can send you if you're bothering me. So yeah, it's a challenge, but it's always fun. And looking back on the ages of my kids now, it's the kind of thing that you can even appreciate more later when you can just be like, hey, that was fun. And you're a little bit more removed from, hey, that was annoying.
I already miss it. Like I said, it was exhausting. There were times where I was like, geez, can I just get away from these kids for 5 minutes? But I already miss it. So yeah, definitely see what you're saying there.
It's good that you feel that way, though. But we want to get to the players because that's what the people are here to hear about. Like I said, we're going to go through guys that we got right in 2024. You can already read the full article with a lot of the guys we're discussing today, but also some others, and plenty more of the why on all of these players. That's on DraftSharks.com right now. You can click the article link in the show notes for this show or at the end of this video. Jared, start us off with your first guy.
We can't have this podcast without talking about Jayden Daniels, who, to me, he might be our biggest hit since Cooper Kupp back in 21 when he was one of our big 3 picks and had the nearly 2,000-yard season. Jayden Daniels was our 2024 breakout pick, and I think as a result he ended up being the most rostered quarterback for Draft Sharks insiders. 19% of Draft Sharks insiders ended up having Jayden Daniels on their team. He was our quarterback 9 in our preseason rankings, ended up being I think quarterback 12 in ADP. And man, I was surprised all summer that Jayden Daniels was not getting more hype, was not getting more expensive, because everyone at this point is aware of the cheat code that is rushing quarterbacks in fantasy football. I think a lot of times those guys can almost be overvalued at this point. I mean, look at Anthony Richardson. I think perfect example. He was just overvalued because of the rushing ability that never really happened with Jayden Daniels. He remained in awesome value all summer, which obviously we took advantage of. All Draft Sharks insiders took advantage of. I think part of it with Jayden Daniels, I think everyone knew the rushing. I think that might have been a bit underrated, but I think he also didn't get enough credit for how good a passer he was in college and ended up being in the NFL. But, just looking forward and, the takeaways with Jayden Daniels for me, prioritizing upside at quarterback and really prioritizing upside at every position is one of the key tenets of our draft strategy. But I think quarterback, especially because low end, even low end quarterback ones really don't move the needle in fantasy football. You look at the scoring from this past season, quarterback 9 and quarterback 15 were separated by about 2 points per game. It did not matter if you had those guys, and you can find those guys on the waiver wire. So take shots on quarterbacks that you think could be difference makers, could be top 5 scorers, not even further over the course of the season, but just on a weekly basis, giving you that type of upside that can swing a matchup in your favor. And of course, that rushing ability is the easiest way to find those upside quarterbacks. But you could also find guys that are undervalued because of, volume projection. If we get a coaching change in a team we think is going to throw a lot more, quarterbacks that just we think have the upside to be super efficient as a passer, whether that's, high yards per attempt, a high touchdown rate. There are multiple paths to finding that upside at quarterback. That's the key takeaway for me with Daniels is don't generally waste draft picks on quarterbacks that, don't have difference making potential. Because again, you can usually find those guys on the waiver wire. You can find a Geno Smith on the waiver wire, a Dak Prescott on the waiver wire that will keep you afloat if you miss on the upside guy. But again, it's those guys like Jayden Daniels who are 8th, 9th round picks that finish top 5 at the position. That's what can really, swing your league.
Yeah, there's so much to pull from this one. First, the Jayden Daniels versus Anthony Richardson thing. To me, that's an example of people still favor what they have seen versus what they haven't yet seen. Like, what at this point last year did Anthony Richardson have over Jayden Daniels? He had already played some games in the NFL, not many. He played 2 full ones, 2 others that he left early, showed us his rushing upside in scant amounts over those games, but that was all that he had. Otherwise, he was far less polished as a college player, far less polished as a passer. So we had less of a reason to believe that he would succeed as a passer than we did with Jayden Daniels heading into the season. Jayden Daniels should have been consensus-wise projected ahead of Anthony Richardson most likely last summer. He never was because people are a little bit apprehensive about new things. We'll talk later about an example where that wasn't the case, but overall, fantasy drafters are just a little bit skittish about something that hasn't happened yet over something that has. Like you said, upside. And I think the difference at quarterback and tight end, which we're going to talk about later, 1 starter positions in most leagues. So it becomes more about when you take the player as opposed to focusing on specific guys. And we were very focused on Jayden Daniels, and a lot of times focusing on the guy that you can get at the certain time that you love the upside on is a key part of that strategy. I can wait until here. I can take Jayden Daniels. It doesn't have to be Jayden Daniels though. And it carries over year to year. Like if you're taking any quarterback really anywhere within the top 10, maybe 12, depending on where they're going, you want some guy that has the capability of dramatically outproducing where you drafted him. It might not seem like QB9 to QB5 is dramatic, but that's a big enough difference by the time we get to the end of the season, how they score on the way to that. You don't want to take a guy at QB9 that you think is QB9, because if that's the guy you're drafting, you might as well wait, target other positions, and take Baker Mayfield as QB 15 and then see what he can do. And that's, a cherry picked example from last year, but you can find those guys every single year. So Jayden Daniels is a lesson in what you want to target, a lesson in weighing what hasn't happened yet, but what could happen versus what we have already seen. And then fantasy drafters don't underrate rushing in quarterbacks as much as they used to, but sometimes they still do. And that was clearly at play with Jayden Daniels. Like that's what made us like him so much, was the floor was great. Or even if he was meh as a passer, he probably would have been fine as a starting fantasy quarterback. And he was better than that as a passer, which is what made him take off. To me, I'm spinning that example ahead right now to Justin Fields, who I said on the show earlier this week with Shane that I wish I had been taking Justin Fields like he was definitely going to start in 2025 earlier in best ball drafts, because if he did, then he's a potential top 12 quarterback. So now that I know he's starting, I'm bumping him up the drafts that are still going, and I'm targeting him, and I don't care how the passing is, because I think that the draft market is still underrating his rushing.
Yep, Fields up into the top 15 in our current quarterback rankings. And again, he could flame out and not be starting for the Jets at the end of the season. We don't care, because when he's in there, he's shown us, this isn't even a Jayden Daniels situation. We've seen it from Justin Fields in the NFL, really for multiple teams. He did it with the Steelers at times last year. He is going to be a quarterback 1 in fantasy because of that rushing.
My first player on this list, Jared, is a bit of a personal victory lap. I am wearing the Brian Dawkins Eagles jersey because it's a celebratory show, but there are a couple of lessons that we can draw from Bucky Irving, the way that his rookie season went for the Tampa Bay Bucks. The first thing is the Kyren Williams lesson. It's what Kyren Williams taught us the year before, and that is don't kill a running back because he tested poorly at the combine. Now, that doesn't mean we ignore the combine testing. If a guy's still getting drafted in best ball drafts as though the combine didn't happen and he had a bad combine, that's a guy we want to be wary of. But when a player goes into something like that and is generally viewed as a good prospect, there were plenty of us who were excited about Bucky Irving as a fantasy prospect heading into the combine. His combine workout sucked. So we should take that into account, but he still had terrific rushing metrics in college, beyond the raw production that still made him attractive. He landed with the Bucks in round 4. Todd Bowles still talked him up the way he ran. Not great draft capital going in round 4, but was still the 6th running back off the board. So that's pretty good versus the rest of the class. And then the thing that made Bucky Irving so attractive last year for, immediate upside was the opportunity. We knew that Rachaad White was overrated from his production over the previous couple of years. We didn't project Rachaad White to lose the job to open the season, but we did talk in multiple formats on the pod, in articles, about that being a possibility, about him potentially ceding rushing and receiving work to Bucky Irving during the season. And that is what made this rookie running back an upside mode darling. That's the whole reason we do ceiling projections. It's the whole reason that we have the draft war room switch over to upside mode halfway through your draft, because the further you get in your draft, the less you should be thinking about what you think will happen, and the more you should be focused on what you think could happen. We want to get guys in those later rounds that could do something well beyond where we're drafting them. That's exactly what happened with Bucky Irving, and I was quite happy for it to happen on plenty of my rosters.
Yeah, the longer I play fantasy football, the more I want to tell people to almost just focus entirely on upside once you get to like round 10 and beyond in your draft, because you play this long enough, you realize that most of those guys you take in the double-digit rounds, you're going to end up dropping more than half of them anyways, right? So just realize that and focus on guys who can be difference makers if they do hit. And for me personally, the biggest lesson with Bucky Irving is, like you said, Matt, not to overrate combine performances, because I took such a roller coaster ride with Bucky last year. I remember when I first started digging into the prospect class, he just jumped off the page, and like all the metrics I look at, right? Like missed tackles, forced, yards after contact, rush yards over expected per attempt, like all that stuff. Bucky Irving looked awesome. Then he bombed the combine, and I was like sort of out on him for a while there. And I think eventually, luckily, probably thanks at least in part to you, I kind of got back on him and was able to, get at least some of him in drafts and benefit from his big season.
I hope you guys know that you just witnessed the biggest concession that Jared has ever given me in influencing his drafting.
There you go. You're welcome.
Who's the next guy on this list?
Devon Achane, who I think somewhat surprisingly ended up being the single most rostered player across all positions for Draft Sharks insiders. 25% of DS insiders had Devon Achane. That's insane. That's basically 3 times the amount you'd expect to have of Devon Achane. You were basically 3 times as likely to land Achane if you were a Draft Sharks insider last year than if you weren't. Obviously had a big fantasy season, finished RB5 in PPR points. That was off a running back 10 or 11 ADP. Achane was generally late second, early third, sometimes mid third round pick. And honestly, he wasn't someone that it felt like we were super high on last summer, but he did consistently pop as a suggested pick in the draft war room. And I was kind of thinking about why that was the case. And I think it's because we were just generally higher on running backs versus wide receivers in the early rounds of drafts. And with Achane being a big part of that, last summer was, I think, probably the peak of like the zero running back movement and just, pounding wide receivers early on. And not that we were saying not to do that, but I do think we were more open to taking running backs early. That ended up being optimal last year. It was a good year for those early running backs, not so good for the wide receiver. So that's my key takeaway with Achane, and it's not specifically with him. It's more a general takeaway. Don't fall into a rigid draft strategy like zero running back. Each year presents a different landscape that we're drafting in as far as both player values and player prices. And that's, again, where I think the draft war room is so awesome. It's completely reliant on the current year data. It doesn't use a set strategy when it's recommending picks. It's looking at our projections for these players, the ADPs on these players, what's going to be available at those positions later on. And it's just highlighting the best picks each round based on all that data. It's not getting, stuck in some rigid draft strategy. It's, taking the best player available for that year. And I think, that is why Achane popped is such a, key pick for Draft Sharks insiders last year.
I'm with you. I was surprised at just how highly rostered Achane was across our users' teams. And I remember when we were doing our draft guide articles last summer, when he would come up, I'd be like, I don't know about Devon Achane here. And that's really the entire point of having the 3D values in there, because anybody can rank within a position, stack running backs where you think they belong. But the challenge is going across positions. It's knowing when in your draft to say, pass on a running back here and take a wide receiver, because next time you're probably going to find good options like Achane, or yeah, go ahead and take another running back here. I know it might not be comfortable because you already have one, but this guy's a good value right here. And later on, you're going to be able to build up those other positions. It's tough to do while you're drafting. That's really the entire point of having a tool that helps you do that, because it takes out that bias. It takes away the discomfort. Like, I don't know if I want that guy here. It's like the numbers say take the guy here. It's obviously up to you ultimately if you want to do so or not. But, if you did fight that urge against taking Achane like I had and go ahead and put him on your team, it ended up paying off.
I think ceiling projection played a part in this with Achane too. The efficiency he showed as a rookie in a highly efficient Dolphins offense, which is funny because that ended up, not being the case with Achane last year, right? Like the efficiency tanked. Miami's offense was not as efficient. It was more a volume thing for Achane. But, again, I think just realizing he had that upside, even compared to some of the other guys going in that range, was a reason that he landed on so many Draft Sharks Insiders teams.
Yeah, I think one other factor for me is we tend to look for guys that are a lot different in our rankings versus consensus, but sometimes, and especially early in the draft, just a couple spots can be the difference between totally passing on a guy in general and targeting him in the round where he's going.
Yeah. And that's why it was so nice to pull this data that this past year for who actually ended up on Draft Sharks Insiders teams, because that's ultimately what matters. It doesn't matter what our rankings were versus consensus. It's who the insiders actually ended up having on their teams.
And you guys probably had plenty of James Conner on your team. We're just going to copy and paste him every year into this spot. He's basically my running back, Tyler Lockett, at this point. James Conner was RB 18 in ADP last August. He finished higher than that, even though he left 2 games early in points per game. He delivered 20 plus fantasy points in weeks 14, 15, and 16, so helped you a lot in the playoffs. The lesson here is pretty simple, I think. The market downgrades older running backs, and we should generally have a little bit more caution with an aging running back, but if the whole market is pushing that guy down, it takes away the risk. So look for guys that fit that profile, but also have a clear path to opportunity. Jared, this ties to Alvin Kamara from our What We Got Wrong show. The issue with him was we ignored the value and we're like, nah, I'm skeptical of Kamara, and didn't take him as much as we should. With Connor, it was like, if you guys don't want Connor, I'll gladly take him for you. And it worked out. Same lesson.
I think with Connor, age and injury risk were and have been the reasons that he's been undervalued in drafts. I'm not saying that stuff doesn't matter. It definitely does. Like you mentioned, we have our aging curves that are factored into projections. We have our injury predictor, which helps us, kind of assess injury risk on these guys. But those risks were more than baked into Connor's price tag last summer. This is a guy who finished as a running back 1 in PPR points per game back in 2023 and was, available as a low end RB2, sometimes even an RB3 in 2024 fantasy draft. So, price matters on these guys. Yeah, those risks were real, but they were more than factored into Connor's ADP.
If you've got a best fantasy football pick of your own at running back, any other position from last year that you want to shout out, let us know in the YouTube comments. We'd love to hear about those. Maybe there's a player who broke your heart, even though you were sure he was going to work out, didn't pay off for you last year. Maybe you want to just commiserate with Jared about taking young children to Disney World. We'll take all that. We like to hear from you. Feel free to get in touch. Jared, hit me with your final pick among the guys we got right.
So far, we've talked about 4 players who we were higher on than consensus and, landed on a bunch of insiders teams and ended up delivering. These last 2 guys we're going to talk about are kind of the reverse, where we were lower than consensus, or, they didn't end up on a lot of DS insiders teams. And that ended up being the correct call. My guy is Sam LaPorta, who was tight end 2 in ADP, was even going tight end 1 in plenty of drafts last summer, tight end 4 in our rankings, which, when you get up to that top part of the rankings, being even 2 spots below consensus is a big deal. Not many insiders ended up drafting Sam LaPorta last summer, which ended up being correct. He was a disappointment for where he was drafted. And for me, the key takeaway with Sam LaPorta and, fading him last year was 2 things, really. One, don't fall for hype on young players. We see these guys come out, have big rookie seasons. They're generally elevated in ADP the following season, and usually, maybe not usually, but sometimes, over elevated. The price gets too rich on them. And the second thing with LaPorta is don't just look at a player's final fantasy production from the previous season. Look at how he scored, how he produced, and then, what's going to be different the coming seasons. Sam LaPorta did lead all tight ends in PPR points as a rookie, but he was, 4th or 5th at the position in targets, catches, and yards. His big rookie season was really fueled by the touchdowns. He had an 11.6% touchdown rate. We accurately projected that to dip this past season. So you factor in a dip in touchdown rate. And then the other concerns heading into last year, a Lions offense that we knew was still going to be run leaning. tough target competition with Amon-Ra St. Brown there, Jahmyr Gibbs there, Jameson Williams potentially taking on a bigger role, which ended up happening. So, LaPorta's target share did end up dipping from 20% as a rookie to 16% last year. And that was really, I think, the biggest reason he disappointed. So again, do a deep dive on all these guys and, kind of figure out what happened last year, what's going to be different. And I think doing that with LaPorta is what got us off him, got, DS insiders off of him.
Yeah, like I said, at quarterback, one starter position is more about when you're drafting the position than exactly who to target. If you're going to take a guy early at tight end, then he's got to be somebody with elite upside, anywhere in the top 4, at least 5, 6, depending on where they're going. It's got to be a player that you think can lead the position in fantasy scoring. That was not what we believed Sam LaPorta to be last year. There were all these risk factors, and it doesn't mean you have to dislike him. Like you said, we had him projected 4th. So it wasn't like we said, oh, Sam LaPorta is going to tank. It was like, he's probably not going to score quite as high as he did last year. And in that area of small margins, it made us not target Sam LaPorta and look at other guys at the position instead. Our 2 most rostered tight ends on DS user rosters at the season's end, by the way, David Njoku, Brock Bowers. So that shows you the range at which our people were drafting tight ends. Those guys were in the bottom half of the top 12, 8, 9, 10, 11. And, that's part of it. It's not, we had Brock Bowers way up here versus everybody else. It's, we had tight ends projected in this way that said, pass on Sam LaPorta, skip these guys. Now here, go ahead and target these 2 guys because they've got upside.
And Bowers was definitely another ceiling projection guy, an upside mode guy. Because I do think we were pretty much right at consensus as far as our, baseline ranking on Bowers, but he beat all the tight ends in that range in ceiling. And I think that's what popped him up to the top of the draft order when it was, time to pounce.
And simply not having already wasted a pick on Sam LaPorta. It's just going to make the DWR more likely to tell you to get a tight end.
Yep.
My last guy, similarly, is a player that we said not to target last year. It's Marvin Harrison Jr. of the Cardinals. And Jared, I called myself out on the What We Got Wrong show for not buying Brian Thomas Jr. at his low risk draft cost last summer. I highlighted Ladd McConkey in the article version of the same thing for just the same reason. And I'm still kicking myself for not going after those guys in drafts last year. I'm sure I lost money on it. The other side of that is Marvin Harrison. And it's again about value, which is usually the case. It's more often that as opposed to this guy sucked and I thought he was good, or this guy's really good and I thought he sucked. We like rookie wide receivers as a type for their late season upside, especially. The key to unlocking that, though, is not paying too much to get it. The area in which Harrison was going last year, he had to have a historic rookie season. He had to have one of the best rookie seasons ever to pay off at his draft cost. And no matter how you feel about him as a prospect, betting on that is just a bad bet. So I was out on that bet all along. You didn't need to like Malik Neighbors more than Marvin Harrison Jr. or even as much as Marvin Harrison Jr. to easily favor Malik Neighbors in drafts last year because he was going 15 spots lower in positional ADP than Harrison was. We're talking the 4-5 turn as opposed to the 1-2 turn in 12-team drafts. So that's a lot less risk. And then, of course, even well beyond that was McConkey and Thomas. So all of those guys, similar types, all early draft picks, Harrison, Neighbors, Thomas, all first rounders, Ladd McConkey early in the second, all 4 guys landed on teams with paths to make them the number 1 wideout right away. If you were excited about Marvin Harrison Jr. last summer, but disappointed at his draft cost, then look for other guys that fit what you like about him. And that's why I think Neighbors, Thomas, McConkey are so important to pull into this one, because even if you, and I was guilty of this, even if you go into drafts and you're not necessarily excited about the other players as much, look for the commonalities between them and say, if I like this so much about Harrison, there's definitely a chance that these same kind of things pay off for Brian Thomas Jr. And if you stashed him as your wide receiver 4, which I wish I had done a lot more, then that certainly paid off.
Yeah, I think for me, like we said with James Conner, price matters. Price is so important when we're deciding whether or not to draft these guys. There was just no consideration of Marvin Harrison's downside with where he was being drafted. I mean, his price last summer was so insane. And it's obviously easy to say that now. But again, the fact that not many Draft Sharks insiders had him, the fact that we were lower than consensus on him, like it's not just hindsight analysis. Actually, I took this This quote is straight from Marvin Harrison's player profile last year. Of course, Harrison was a top 10 pick in the NFL draft. This is straight from his profile last year. Only one of 12 top 10 wide receiver picks over the previous 10 seasons has finished as a top 12 wide receiver in PPR points per game as a rookie. Only 3 of those 12 finished inside the top 24. So Harrison was just priced to have a historic season with just, again, no consideration to what if things go wrong? What if things just don't go exactly right? Because things had to go perfectly for him to pay that off. So he was just an easy fade. I think, again, price matters. Don't fall into the rookie hype on these guys. Those are the 2 biggest takeaways for me on Harrison.
And I can remember a few years ago when Jamar Chase was going what seemed early in his rookie season. And I was like, I'm wary of him because he's got to really have a very good rookie season to pay off. If we look back, though, he was going like in the range where Malik Neighbors is going. Yeah, I think Marvin Harrison Jr. got a boost because of stuff like that. People don't want to miss out on that Jamar Chase, but kind of ignoring where we were actually taking those guys that broke out in the past.
Yeah, I don't think a rookie receiver had ever gone that high, and I'm not sure one ever will again after Harrison's 2024.
Oh, it'll happen. Didn't you see what the rookie receivers did last year? You got to have a rookie receiver, Jared.
Yeah, right.
What we got right in 2024 can help you win in 2025. That is the article. It's up on draftsharks.com right now. You can read about many of the guys that we talked about here, plus some more, though. And our 2025 rankings are already up on the site, available for any format. So you can start seeing who might become some of our guys in 2025 drafts, maybe some guys who even already are in that category. You can check our ADP market index, especially on the best ball ADP pages on draftsharks.com. They compare the player's ADP with our projections for that player to highlight values to show who is underrated, who is overrated, who's just right versus market price right now. We are always paying attention to player values and draft trends and learning from what we get right and what we get wrong every year, because we want to make sure that Draft Sharks remains your unfair advantage.